I slid the crisp white envelope from my mailbox, expecting a welcome package from a local hardware store. What I found inside wasn't a coupon. It was a demand. A single staggering number typed in cold black ink. $88,000. The letter claimed it was for back dues, but I didn't belong to an HOA. I'd bought a ranch, a sprawling piece of freestanding property I thought was my own sovereign kingdom. There were no rules, no committees, no one to tell me what I could or couldn't do with my own land. Or so I thought. That one piece of paper threatened to take it all away. How could I owe a debt to an organization I never agreed to be a part of? This wasn't a bill. It was a declaration of war. Image 1, the dream. For my entire adult life, the dream wasn't a corner office or a fancy car. It was space. Quiet open land where the only noise was the wind in the trees and the only schedule was the one I set for myself. After 2 decades of saving, of sacrificing, that dream finally had a name. Whispering Pines Ranch. It wasn't just a property. It was a sanctuary. 30 acres of rolling Texas hill country, dotted with hardy live oaks and a modest, sturdy ranch house that had stood for 50 years. The day I got the keys, I walked the fence line, my hand brushing against the weathered wooden posts. This land had a history, a soul. It felt free. The real estate agent had been clear. "It's a standalone property, Mr. Evans," she'd said, her tone professional. "No deed restrictions. You answer to the sky and the soil out here." Those words were music to my soul. I pictured a future workshop, maybe a few more horses, a garden that could feed my family. This was the blank canvas I'd been searching for. The free man. The first few months were pure bliss. Mornings started with coffee on the porch, watching the sun burn the mist off the meadows. My wife, Sarah, and our daughter, Lily, thrived in the open air. We painted the front door a cheerful red, just because we could. We planted a young oak tree near the house, a symbol of our own fresh start, our roots digging in deep. I'd see the occasional neighbor in the distance, a wave from a truck window, nothing more. It was peaceful. It was perfect. The bureaucratic wall. But then a small, formal-looking letter arrived, mixed in with the grocery store flyers. It was from something called the Canyon Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. I almost tossed it, assuming it was a misdelivered mistake for some fancy gated community miles away. But something made me open it. It was a polite yet firm welcome letter. It mentioned something about architectural guidelines and community standards. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. This had to be an error. I was on Whispering Pines Ranch, not in Canyon Ridge Estates. I dismissed it as a simple bureaucratic mix-up. A letter lost in the vastness of the county filing system. I threw it away, unaware that it wasn't a mistake at all. It was the first quiet click of a trap that had been set long before I ever arrived. The liens gather. The peace I'd fought so hard for began to feel fragile, like glass holding back a gathering pressure. That first letter was a pebble. What followed was an avalanche. It started with a fine, a crisp official notice in my mailbox citing a violation of Community Standard B12, unapproved external color modifications. The offense? Our cheerful red front door. The fine was $250. My disbelief curdled into anger. I drove down to the address listed on the stationery, a small, bland office suite in a nearby strip mall. A woman named Mrs. Gable, with a smile as sharp as a paper cut, informed me that Whispering Pines Ranch was, and I quote, "a legacy parcel within the Canyon Ridge Estates HOA jurisdiction." Jurisdiction? I sputtered. My property deed makes no mention of an HOA. Her smile didn't waver. The covenants were filed with the county in 1985, Mr. Evans. All subsequent properties, including yours, fall under their purview. Your door is burgundy. Approved colors are eggshell, slate, or dove white. You have 30 days to rectify the situation. I left feeling like I'd been sucker punched. This wasn't a mistake. It was a claim. A claim on my land, my home, my freedom. The king on his porch. I hired a local real estate attorney, a man named Ben Croft, who had a reputation for being a bulldog. He reviewed the documents, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. "It's a mess, Mark," he finally said. The original developer did file covenants for a massive planned community called Canyon Ridge Estates, but he went bankrupt after only developing a small section. The HOA that exists today is a volunteer board run by a handful of homeowners from that original section. They've been aggressively interpreting their boundaries for years. Aggressively? What does that mean? It means they're claiming authority over all the land the original developer planned to develop, including dozens of standalone ranches like yours that were never formally annexed. They've been quietly sending letters and collecting dues from some of your neighbors for years, bullying them into compliance because no one has had the money or the will to fight. The reality of their scheme was breathtaking in its audacity. They were a phantom government, taxing people for a citizenship they never applied for. And then, the true hammer fell. It wasn't just the door. A new violation arrived, this time for the young oak tree we'd planted. Unauthorized landscaping altering the native aesthetic. Another fine. Then another for my old reliable pickup truck parked in my own driveway. Non-compliant vehicle on display. Each envelope was a fresh turn of a screw. I refused to pay, refused to paint my door, refused to uproot our tree. My defiance became a beacon, and they answered with escalating fire. The phone call started, always during dinner, a polite recorded voice reminding me of my outstanding obligations. Then a certified letter arrived. This one wasn't a fine. It was a formal notice of lien placement on my property for failure to pay annual HOA dues. The amount? $4,000. My blood ran cold. A lien. They were putting a financial claim on my home, my land, my dream. Ben sent a blistering cease and desist letter, challenging their very authority. Their response was not from a lawyer, but from the HOA board president himself. A man named Arthur Vance. He showed up at my door on a Saturday morning. He was a man in his late 60s, dressed in khakis and a polo shirt with the calm, unassailable confidence of someone who has never been told no. He didn't greet me. He just looked past my shoulder at the red door and sighed, as if deeply disappointed. "Mr. Evans," he began, his voice a low, condescending drone. "We're trying to build a certain standard of living here. A community. Your individualism is causing a visual blight. It lowers everyone's property values." "Get off my property," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had to physically restrain. He smiled, a thin, bloodless line. "This is HOA property, sir, and we have rules. Now, about that lien, it's a serious matter, but it's nothing compared to the other issue we need to discuss." He handed me a new sheaf of papers. "The annual dues for Canyon Ridge Estates are $4,000. They have been for a decade. Our records indicate that the previous owner of this property never paid them. As the new title holder, that debt, plus late fees and administrative costs, has now transferred to you." My heart hammered against my ribs. "How much?" I whispered, already knowing the answer was going to destroy me. Arthur Vance looked me dead in the eye, his gaze utterly devoid of empathy. "The total back dues, Mr. Evans, come to $88,412. You have 90 days to pay in full, or we will be forced to begin foreclosure proceedings to satisfy the debt." $88,000. For rules I never agreed to, for a community I never joined. The number echoed in the silence he left behind. A financial death sentence hanging over my family's future. This was no longer about a red door or a tree. It was a fight for our home itself, and the clock was now ticking down to the moment we would lose everything. The 90 days Arthur Vance had given me weren't a countdown to a payment. They were a countdown to an execution. The weight of that $88,000 debt was a physical presence in our home. A cold shadow that dimmed the light in my wife's eyes and made our daughter ask why Daddy was always so quiet. We were living on the precipice of losing everything we'd worked for, everything we loved. Ben Croft, my attorney, was preparing a full legal challenge, but the wheels of justice grind slowly, and the HOA's foreclosure threat was a speeding train. That's when I decided to stop being a defendant and start being a detective. If this was a war for the truth, I needed to find a weapon they hadn't accounted for. I spent every night after work buried in online county archives, my eyes straining at scanned, blurry microfilm of property records from the 1980s. I was looking for the original master plan for Canyon Ridge Estates, the developer's Bible, the covenant revealed, and then I found it. Not just the plan, but the amendments. And tucked away in a dusty, forgotten digital folder was a single pivotal document, the covenant of abandonment. It was a legal clause I'd never heard of. It stated that if the developer failed to complete and sell a minimum number of lots within the planned community by a specific date, in this case, December 31st, 1990, the entire project would be deemed legally abandoned, and all covenants and restrictions would become null and void. The bankrupt developer had never met that threshold. Canyon Ridge Estates, as a legal entity with the power to enforce rules, had died before it was ever truly born. The HOA that existed today was a ghost, a reanimated corpse run by Arthur Vance and his board, pretending to have power they simply did not possess. They had built their entire kingdom on a foundation of sand and bullying, and for years no one had ever thought to check the deed. I called Ben, my voice shaking with a mixture of fury and exhilaration. "They're a phantom," I told him. "They have no legal standing, none." Ben was cautious but electric with energy. "This is it, Mark. This is the silver bullet. But we can't just send them a letter. We need to confront them with this in a forum they can't ignore. We need to make it public." The annual HOA meeting was in 1 week. It was held in the community clubhouse, a building I was supposedly paying for with my back dues. Ben and I crafted our plan. This wouldn't be a polite legal discussion. This would be a public execution. The night of the meeting, the air was thick with tension. I walked into that clubhouse, a lone wolf entering the lion's den. The room was filled with the homeowners from the original developed section, the people who had bought into the HOA life. Arthur Vance stood at the podium, a projector screen behind him detailing his vision for community beautification. He saw me and his smile tightened, but he showed no surprise. He likely thought I was there to beg. He finished his presentation and opened the floor for questions. Several people asked about landscaping and pool hours. Then I stood up. The room went quiet. Every head turned. "Mr. Vance," I began, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the sterile air. "I have a question about the HOA's legal authority to levy fines and place liens on my property, Whispering Pines Ranch." Vance sighed, the long-suffering public servant. "Mr. Evans, we've been over this. The covenants are clear." "No, sir," I interrupted, my voice hardening. "They are not." I walked to the side of the room where a second projector I had prearranged was set up. With a click of my remote, the screen behind Vance went dark, and a new one lit up beside him, displaying the damning covenant of abandonment document. "This is the original master covenant for Canyon Ridge Estates, filed in 1985, I announced to the now silent room. Page 42, Section 14B, the Covenant of Abandonment. It states, and I quote, "Should the developer fail to complete the sale of a minimum of 100 residential lots by December 31st, 1990, this entire planned community development shall be considered legally abandoned, and all covenants, conditions, and restrictions herein shall be rendered null and void, dissolving any future obligation." I could see the blood draining from Vance's face. He gripped the podium. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "The county records show that only 47 lots were ever sold by that deadline," I continued, my voice rising with the force of my conviction. "The development was legally abandoned. The HOA you are running, Mr. Vance, the one that has been demanding thousands of dollars from me and who knows how many other ranchers you've intimidated, has no more legal authority than a book club. You are collecting dues and enforcing rules for a community that ceased to exist over 30 years ago." I turned to face the other homeowners, my neighbors, many of whom looked shocked and confused. "How many of you have ever actually seen the original covenants? How many of you have questioned where your money goes? This man has been operating a sham, using your fear and your desire for a nice neighborhood to legitimize a massive fraud." Chaos erupted. People were shouting, standing up, demanding answers. Vance was sputtering, his carefully constructed facade of authority crumbling into dust. "This is nonsense, a misinterpretation," he yelled, but his voice was drowned out by the fury of the crowd he was supposed to lead. The climax came when a man in the front row, a longtime resident, stood and pointed a trembling finger at Vance. "You told me I had to pay $5,000 in late fees last year. You said it was mandatory. Was that a lie too?" Vance had no answer. He just stood there, exposed, his kingdom of paper rules collapsing around him in that fluorescent-lit room. The look on his face wasn't just one of defeat. It was the raw, naked terror of a man who has just seen the walls of his entire life fall down, revealing the hollow emptiness behind them. The predator had become the prey, cornered by the one truth he never thought anyone would find. The ghost had just been exposed to the light. The roar in that clubhouse didn't die down for a long time. It was the sound of a spell being broken, Arthur Vance, pale and sweating, tried to bluster his way through, claiming I was taking a single clause out of context, that their lawyer would have a field day with this. But the trust was shattered. The foundation of his petty kingdom had been exposed as rotten, and the people he'd ruled over were now a mob demanding answers. He eventually gathered his papers and fled the podium, pushing through the crowd under a hail of shouted questions, his dignity left in tatters on the floor. The real battle, however, had just moved from the court of public opinion to a court of law. The following week, Bencroft filed a massive lawsuit on my behalf. It wasn't just about my $88,000 anymore. It was a class action suit against the Canyon Ridge Estates HOA, its board members personally, and Arthur Vance specifically, alleging fraud, extortion, and wrongful lien placement. We invited every property owner within the HOA's falsely claimed jurisdiction to join us. And join they did. Dozens of my neighbors, the ranchers and homeowners I'd never really known, came forward. Stories poured out of being strong-armed into paying back dues they didn't owe, of outrageous fines for trivial violations, of the quiet, simmering fear that had governed their lives for years. The legal process was a whirlwind. The HOA's lawyer, faced with the irrefutable covenant of abandonment, had no leg to stand on. They folded faster than a cheap suit. The judge didn't just rule in our favor. He eviscerated them. The ruling was a thing of beauty. The Canyon Ridge Estates HOA was declared legally invalid and was permanently dissolved. Every single lien they had placed on our properties was ordered to be immediately removed from the county records. The back dues were deemed uncollectible, a phantom debt from a phantom organization. The $88,000 threat vaporized into the air from whence it came, but it went further. Due to the evidence of fraudulent intent, the court ordered the dissolved HOA's assets, years of illegally collected dues sitting in bank accounts, to be liquidated and distributed back to the homeowners they had victimized. I didn't get my $88,000, but I did receive a check for the $4,000 in current year dues I'd refused to pay, plus a few thousand more from the settlement pool. It wasn't about the money. It was the principle. It was justice. The long-term consequences were profound. Arthur Vance and his board members were personally liable for a significant portion of the legal fees. I heard through the grapevine that Vance had to take out a second mortgage on his home to cover his share. The man who had threatened to foreclose on my ranch nearly lost his own. The poetic justice was not lost on anyone. He became a pariah in the very community he sought to control. I'd see him sometimes, loading groceries into his car, and he would never meet my eye. The unassailable confidence was gone, replaced by the slumped shoulders of a man who had been publicly and definitively unmasked. For our community, it was a rebirth. Without the shadow of the HOA, a new informal neighborhood association actually formed, one based on mutual respect, not enforced conformity. We have seasonal potlucks now. We share tools. We look out for each other's properties. My red front door became a symbol, not of defiance, but of hard-won freedom. My daughter's oak tree stands tall and strong, its roots a testament to the fact that some things, when planted with love and defended with courage, cannot be uprooted by petty tyranny. The impact on my family was the most profound. The constant gnawing stress that had filled our home lifted. The dream of Whispering Pines Ranch was no longer under siege. It was fulfilled. We built that workshop. We got more horses. The land felt truly ours again, its peace earned, not just given. Not just. This experience left me with a powerful takeaway, one I tell anyone who will listen, especially those looking to buy a home. The fight isn't always about right and wrong in the abstract. Sometimes it's about digging. It's about questioning the unquestionable authority. It's about finding that one forgotten document in a dusty archive that can change everything. Arthur Vance wasn't defeated by a louder voice or a bigger lawyer. He was defeated by the truth, a truth that had been sitting there, waiting for 30 years for someone stubborn enough to go looking for it. So the next time you're handed a rule that feels unjust or a bill that feels fraudulent, don't just accept it. Don't just get angry. Get curious. Do the research. You never know what you might find buried in the fine print. Because sometimes, the most powerful weapon against a bully isn't a fist, it's a footnote. As for me, I'm sitting on my porch, looking out at my land. The sun is setting, painting the sky in colors no HOA could ever approve. And that red door? It's staying red. It's a constant, vibrant reminder that some fights are worth having, and that sometimes you have to risk losing everything to truly secure what is yours.